Hello and welcome to this budget special on ET Now, where we set the agenda for Budget 2022. I'm Tamanna Inamdar. This year's union budget is going to be a tough balancing act for the Finance Minister, especially so because it comes under the shadow of a third wave of COVID-19, though which has not been devastating as per personal health of people, but has hit the pace of economic recovery. On the other hand, you have global factors that are not too conducive. You have spiking oil prices, you have sticky inflation and uncertainty on the global horizon. In this situation, what should and what can Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman do in her budget on the 1st of February to not only calm tempers, to evoke animal spirits within Indian industry, but also bring back consumption, which has been muted for the last few months? To speak on some of these issues and, in a sense, help set the agenda for Budget 2022 and our coverage right here on ET Now, I'm joined by a fabulous panel. Rajnish Kumar, former CMD of SBI, is with us on the show today. I'm speaking with Dr. Ashutosh Raghuvanshi, MD and CEO of Fortis Healthcare, and our very own Swaminathan Aiyar, consulting editor, ET Now, joins us on the show. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for speaking with us here at ET Now. Swami, let me begin by getting your overview. I spoke in the opening comments a bit about the context and the backdrop in which this budget is being presented. Do you think that the Omicron wave and the impact it may have had once again on economic recovery, tax collections, will weigh heavily on the Finance Minister?
I think I'd start by saying that the overwhelming issue which forms the background actually is the state elections, especially the elections in Uttar Pradesh. I think this is going to be a more important determinant of the budget than Omicron, than the global conditions, than the quantitative easing issue in the United States. I think more important than all of these is the fact that they are really worried about Uttar Pradesh. It appears in the opinion polls that Akhilesh Yadav is catching up. And although the BJP is way ahead, I mean, they won 3/4 of the seats last time, there really is a feeling that, the BJP cannot even afford a narrow win. It must have a good win. So to that extent, I would expect this budget to be tailored very significantly to making sure of that electoral victory. Making sure of that electoral victory means you don't go for any radical changes in this budget, because radical changes will produce some losers in the short run, even if there are a lot of gainers in the long run. So I think one of the emphasis will be, don't go for radical changes, have small incremental changes. Number two, I think it will be an election budget. You have to look at every vote bank. No vote bank left behind will be one of the themes. There will be something for industry, something for agriculture, something for small industries, something for services. That there will be an attempt to cover the entire gamut of people. And so therefore it will be a soft budget. It will not be a tough budget attempting to get fiscal discipline back on track. If you remember, the target is to get the fiscal deficit down to 3% of GDP. Right now, thanks to a revenue boom, I think we will certainly achieve or overachieve this target of 6.8% of GDP for the current year. It may be down to maybe 6.6 or 6.7. How much will they reduce it? If you ask me, it will be probably well above 6% of GDP that Mrs. Sitharaman will present, because she does not want to be fiscally very tough in an election year. Not only that, there is the perfectly good reason saying, I have to tackle Omicron. And maybe it is not as deadly as the past wave. It is nevertheless a health crisis of a very significant nature. So COVID relief has to be provided for. That is a very important part. Secondly, there is no question that while there is an improvement in the economy, I mean, the IMF had said we'll have 9.5% growth in the current year. It may end up at 9% maybe because of Omicron. Next year, it projected 8.5%, which looks very favorable. I would say that, underneath, we are still, this is an economy hit, doubly hit by adverse global trends and by the health trends. So this is not an economy which is in really good shape. This is an economy which needs care. In these circumstances, I would not expect a tough budget. I would not expect a tough stance. I would expect there to be a lot of money available on these various other things for different vote banks, definitely for fighting Omicron. And I would say there will be no radical changes. You will not say any strong things for farm reforms, privatization, or that kind of thing. Nevertheless, they will provide to get a significant amount of revenue through privatization and asset sales. They have not done very well so far this year, but I think they will try to emphasize that next year. And they will say we have to keep up both capex and supporting consumer spending because Omicron is still a problem. Those will be emphasized.
So, Swami, as always, has set the agenda, set the stage for what we can expect. And that's a very important takeaway, that a key factor is going to be how this budget perhaps helps with the elections coming up. Now, Mr. Kumar, the public sector bank network becomes the fulcrum and the funnel for distributing government schemes. Do you think there'll be a lot of focus, in your view, on the rural economy, on the agricultural sector? I remember 2022 was also the year when the government has promised farm incomes will double. How do you see this panning out?
No, definitely, I think, as Mr. Aiyar was mentioning, that the elections are on the horizon. But other than that, if you look at on the positive side, the government has much more headroom because there has been buoyancy in the revenues. And right now, the priority still is growth. But two major worries are inflation and in unemployment. These two are the major. So in such circumstances, spending on infrastructure that has been the priority, and allocations are higher, but actually spending on the ground is yet to be what it should be. So that is one thing. Second is definitely because, like, considering that elections are on the horizon, so we can definitely expect, not only for election consideration, but otherwise also, the rural sector definitely needs more push. You talked about the banking sector being fulcrum. So banking sector today has the capability in terms of what you call the outreach or the financial inclusion. So whatever amount of money government wants to put directly into the hands of the beneficiary, the system is capable of handling it. But the farmer's income definitely, despite all the efforts, that has not increased to the desired pace. So anything which government does to improve the income of the farmers, that would always be a welcome step. But the government's resources, though despite the good revenues, but there's a huge pressure on the government finances always, whether to meet the needs of defense or whether to spend on more healthcare or to spend more on education or agriculture. So it is always a difficult balancing act for the government. And that difficulty is not new this year. That is always, and at the same time, at macro level, the government has to send signal of the that they are not reckless, and which has been the case. Fiscal deficit seems to be what in the current COVID circumstances would be an acceptable figure. Otherwise, 6.8% deficit is not an acceptable figure. But in current circumstances, globally, this has become a norm, and fiscal deficit has gone to the lower in the priority, and more is on the how the government spends money, how the expenditure gets increased, how the demand gets created, and there are supply side constraints which are causing inflation. So how does the fiscal measures tackle that? So there are these are major issues which are currently would be part of the budget making process.
The the challenge of increasing spends on healthcare remains. Even in the last budget, we saw a much larger figure in terms of allocation for healthcare. And let me bring in Dr. Raghuvanshi here. Do you think the government will now have to apportion allocations for things like booster shots? And what more would you like to see? There was a hefty allocation last year, but in terms of strengthening your public health system, do you think enough has been done, Dr. Raghuvanshi?
Tamanna, I think as far as there is nothing new in as far as the ground situation is concerned, as Mr. Kumar very clearly told about the different fields of education, healthcare, agriculture, etc. The healthcare fault lines were very visible for very, very long time, and everybody is aware of that. But the current pandemic has sort of brought them into focus. Now, as you pointed out, last year sufficient funds were allocated, but the key is how they are spent. So as far as vaccination programs are concerned, I think adequate provisions had been made and those have been delivered too. And I think going forward also the government should be able to handle that part. What is more going to be more interesting and what we will be keen to see is how the allocation for the infrastructure part of healthcare increases. And then obviously then the proof of the pudding is in eating it. So how those projects are executed will be even more important. In a country like India, I think the public healthcare system is the backbone, and it has to be the one which leads the effort. Though there are certain important roles which the private corporate healthcare plays, but those roles are limited to center of excellences in terms of critical care or in terms of very cutting edge kind of work. Now, the private healthcare industry also has been having certain expectations in terms of, especially in terms of GST, where the services are exempt. And as a result of that, the input tax credit is not availed by the healthcare industry, which in other sense increases the input cost. So that has been a long-standing demand as far as the corporate healthcare is concerned. But my focus and my expectation from the budget would be that there is a greater emphasis on the public healthcare infrastructure, especially on the digital health mission which had been announced, because that though will not yield results in the short term, but I think that is what extremely important for the long term future of healthcare in this country, where this would be like a highway of growth. This would be a backbone on which various services will be developed. Private healthcare providers will also be able to provide solutions in limited ways, and the government system and the public healthcare system will become more efficient and seamless, whether patients are treated in a private facility or a public facility, the records transportability, all those things are going to add additional efficiency and will make the outcomes in the healthcare better. So I would like to see much higher allocation for digital health as well as the public health programs in this budget. What was done last year sounded like a big figure, but considering that it also included some of the public sanitation, water related measures, etc., and also the vaccination related expense, yes. It was not probably adequate. We spend a huge amount of money on defense. It is very important, but at the same time health is equally important, and we spend almost 1/5 of what we spend on defense. So I think that is very important. And as I said again, public healthcare infrastructure, human resources development in healthcare are two extremely important topics on which the government has to focus.
No, and the role of the public health system was very obvious when it came to vaccinations. Our vaccination rates actually jumped up when finally public health systems took over, and not just depended on it being, spearheaded by private health systems. We'll take a very short break at this point, and I think we've set the premise very clearly on what needs to be done. But what can Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman do? We'll come back and ask that question of our expert panel after this very short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching the special show on ET Now, where we're setting the agenda for Budget 2022. Swami, let's come to two clear challenges that right now perhaps the Finance Minister faces. One is inflation, and the other is the impact it's had on consumption demand and how it has been subdued, especially in rural India. You had the HUL boss say recently that please increase allocations to Narega. We need to do that. We're seeing demand falling. Do you think that the budget will be the right platform where we might see some of these measures?
The budget will certainly attempt to address both those issues. Whether it will actually, in practice, bring down inflation, it's not up to a budget to do it. This depends on international trends. It depends on what happens to price of oil, what happens to the price of other commodities. It depends a lot on what happens on the monetary side. It depends on what the Reserve Bank does. I think Mrs. Sitharaman will talk about the need to curb inflation, but she is not going to be using the budget as a tool to curb inflation. Using a budget as a tool to curb inflation would mean you bring down the fiscal deficit very drastically. I do not believe that she will do this. It would be wrong, I think, both for political reasons with the UP elections are coming up and even for economic reasons. I think economically we need to say that this is a budget which still needs to support an economy that has been hurt by COVID. So if there is some inflation, so be it. And I would say you would leave it to the Reserve Bank to try and tighten rates and do something to curb inflation on that side. Over and above that, you hope that global inflation perhaps has peaked and will begin to come down. I mean, this is the message that the Fed and others are sending out, that there were some temporary COVID-induced disruptions of various kinds in supply chains. With that being mended, if global inflation begins to come down, then that may turn out to be the most important way that inflation comes down, rather than as though the finance minister has a magic wand and can bring inflation up and down. So I don't think that would be the focus. Sorry, the inflation, the other one you said was the consumers. Yeah, as far as that is concerned, yes, there will be support for Narega.
Yes, the lack of consumption, the muted consumption.
Yes, so I said there would be support for Narega. I think they will speak quite a lot about what they're going to do for farmers. How they are going to do it, I cannot tell. But usually the way it is done is, since the government doesn't have very much money, you create a number of schemes that the banks are supposed to finance. I mean, this is typically the politically way it is done. I would expect several such schemes. And to some extent, this can actually work in boosting consumer demand and in channeling bank funds into various schemes, which may then help to boost consumer demand. But I think everybody is very aware of the need that, consumer demand must be kept up. That will be a part of the budget, no doubt.
Mr. Kumar, let me talk a bit about divestment targets. And we know that the divestment targets have fallen woefully short of what the target was last year. Against 1.75 lakh crore, we've not even hit 10,000 crores. Do you think that there is scope to ramp up these numbers in this fiscal year, considering that the global mood and the investment mood may have also turned? There's a lot of uncertainty right now because of the Fed's programs. Do you think that the government will once again have quite a lofty target, and can it really achieve it?
Yeah, divestment always, it's a very complex process, but one is that Air India. So this was like a very, very big issue, but having achieved it, so that is one big achievement, I would say. And there's a lot of work going on for LIC IP. Now, I think other than that, now in next, by 31st March, I don't foresee a situation where there will be any other major action or the transactions can be concluded if the government is able to do LIC IPO. So that itself will be I would say, a big achievement. But other than that, everything will go to the now the next fiscal, and there are like the policy of the government is very clear about like what is where they are looking to sell and the strategic sectors, non-strategic sectors. So the government's exit plan is very much there. It was announced last year. And how to implement it on the ground is always a challenge. And the bigger the transaction, the more complex it is. So, for example, BPCL, which is going on for now quite some time, and but still it has not happened. And as far as Indian economy is concerned, yes, currently because of the action by the US Fed, and there has been some outflow of the money. But because the foreign investors still believe in India's story, this is one market where you have the growth potential, you have the demographics in favor of the country. We are still one of the youngest. I think we are the youngest country, and the per capita income is just $2,000 per person. The infrastructure requirement, 100 trillion rupees. So I think we have not been able to spend what is required. Say you need to spend 20 trillion rupees every year, but I don't think that kind of investment is happening. So whatever we want to do, there is a huge scope, but the execution always is an issue. So this investment always, there are a lot of issues crop up. But I think Air India and LIC in this year, this itself would be a great achievement.
That will be a big achievement. Yes, implementation is always the key. But when it comes to the budget, it's more about the announcement. And then we have the whole year after that, of course, to track whether any of those announcements are being implemented or not. We leave it at that, gentlemen. I want to thank all of you for joining us today on ET Now's Budget Special. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.